First is the title of your webinar, a circuit breaker of unsustainable practices, which is to me is a little bit ironic, because when there's a occurrence of circuit breaking, right, what we want to do is to make it back to normal again. So in the normal sense of the word, after a circuit breaker period, we want to go back to normal. Of course, now they insist that it's not normal, it's a new normal.
Recently, there was a report that the International Energy Agency said that the social distancing that we have undertaken at a global scale has led to an unprecedented 8% reduction of global carbon emissions that is projected to take place by the end of this year. This is unprecedented. It hasn't been done before. But yet, although it sounds like it's a lot, it is still not enough to reach the goals that 195 countries have agreed upon during the 2015 Paris Agreement to restrict climate change to a 1.5 degrees C threshold.
The temporary nature of whatever positive effects we may be witnessing at the moment. I think from the last financial crisis, 08 and 09, people have observed that immediately after that there was a huge rebound effect, right, where countries are just itching to get back to business and looking for the quickest path to recovery. In fact, we are seeing a lot of that even at this moment, even when the pandemic isn't even over yet.
This sort of social distancing, the staying at home, the lack of travel, both on the surface, on the seas, through the air, the reduction in industrial outputs, the cutting down of global supply chain, these sort of actions are driven from a personal level, but this sort of global personal sustainability through this sort of behavioral change, albeit enforced, is good, but it's not enough to be climate resilient. And this sort of the switch from the global to the personal sustainability often detracts from the very unfair and unequal carbon burden that is shared across the globe.
But on the other hand, I'm a bit more optimistic than Harvey as well, because I think this circuit breaker and shutdown, whatever you call it, in different parts of the world, may have also given us an opportunity to see a different way forward, right? So literally sometimes, there are reports that people for example, in Kathmandu are now able to see Mount Everest from the Kathmandu Valley, which they haven't been able to do for I don't know how many years, decades at least. So literally and metaphorically, people may begin to see a different future for themselves. From simple things like the efficiency gains in telecommuting to bigger things, for example, in having less cars on the road when we do get back to business.
And there's a push recently when the government looked at its climate plans up to the year 2030 and beyond. We need to get off natural gas. It is the cleanest fossil fuel, but it's still a fossil fuel regardless. And there's been a push towards looking at renewable energy and also the potential of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which can work at smaller scales. But if you want to upscale that to something reaching Singapore's demand for energy, it will take a substantial amount of investment and trials and deployment.
Not easy or rather, for most people, they don't really think of COVID or any traumatic events and link it to climate change. And this is one of the problems of getting people's buy-in in climate change policies or climate change issues, because it is so amorphous, it is so big, it is everything and yet nothing. For many people, that seems to be the case. that it is very hard to articulate a narrative for them.
I think many organizations, both corporate and public sectors, are beginning to see the importance of investing in climate solutions, both to address climate change impacts and also to explore new economic opportunities. And one such solution is to look at how we might be able to invest in protecting the existing carbon stocks in our natural ecosystems like forests or mangroves or whatever, and also to restore some of these ecosystems and start sequestering more carbon that way.
Behavioral change is very, very difficult to do. In my classes in both previously at NUS and now in SMU, when I teach climate change, what I do is I get my students to perform the hashtag climate challenge, where for a unspecified period of time, it's up to their own choosing, they try and minimize their carbon footprint, which includes not eating meat, going vegetarian, going full vegan, not taking private transport to school or to campus. Some very adventurous students have attempted not showering for a week with, shall we say, very interesting consequences.
To the extent that we evaluate the entire economy in a different matrix, right? I don't think so. I just cannot imagine, and it's not our choice. It's not Singapore's choice. It has to be a choice of the global community, that suddenly GDP is no longer an important criteria.
Every one of those pathways also include nature-based solutions. So we do have to change our policies and practices when it comes to how we deal with nature, with our natural ecosystems. And at the same time, those solutions also may become new economic opportunities because by protecting those carbon stocks, we could also generate carbon credits, and those carbon credits become a commodity that could be traded, and it could be a new source of investment and revenue for some of these sectors.
It has to change. I share Harvey's optimism that it will change, primarily because of COVID. It focuses the attention so much on these inequalities that no policymaker, no business can afford to ignore that. The challenge, though, is it enough? And secondly, do we have the time to do so?
There are two aspects of consumption that we can think about. Yes, I agree completely with you about sustainable practices in both the production of food and other things that we use. But actually, my reference point for making those statements were not those kinds of things. They are actually the kinds of things that we don't actually need, and yet we keep on buying. Sustainably produced mobile phone is meaningless if you change it, a new phone once every 6 months. Okay, so that it defeats the whole purpose of sourcing for a sustainable produced phone. So there is that element as well. It's both the way the thing is produced and the frequency in which we consume the thing.
I've learned that if you want your impact to go beyond what your own primary audience that you're comfortable with, you have to force yourself to be uncomfortable. You have to go and speak to audiences who are not so friendly and who potentially can be adversarial in nature. It's a challenge. Thankfully, it's not that big an issue in Singapore. But if you want to broaden your outreach, you first have to show that you don't talk in motherhood statements.
I do want to thank the speakers for very graciously still taking questions and replying and giving very, very frank and honest feedback. I think the power is in the hands of the young. and we have many young people in this session. We have about 108 students. In fact, a third of the registrants were actually students, and I'm quite hopeful that if we all put our minds to it, a cathartic event like the COVID-19 pandemic will prompt us to really look hard about how we live and how we think about the future. I personally am seriously thinking about the future because I have 3 young children who are going to own the world after I leave the world. So we must, do something to hand over the world to them in at least better than what we have created for them